It's 10:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. You're finally sitting down after a long day, scrolling through your bank app, and you see that number, $5,000. That's your emergency fund. You feel good, right? You've followed the golden rule of personal finance. You've got 3 months of expenses tucked away. You're safe. But then, the check engine light comes on the next morning. You take it to the shop, and the mechanic tells you it's a sensor issue tied to the new driver assist tech in your car. The bill? Down to $800. Suddenly, nearly 40% of your safety net is gone in one morning. And as you're standing there, you realize, if you lost your job tomorrow, that remaining $3,200 wouldn't even cover 2 months of rent and groceries at today's prices. My name is John, and I spend way too much time thinking about the math behind your bank account. If you're someone who feels like you're doing everything right, but you still feel one bad week away from a meltdown, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because today, we need to have a very uncomfortable conversation about why the 3 to 6 month rule is officially dead in 2025. Look, here's the thing. Most of the financial advice you see online was written for an economy that doesn't exist anymore. We are living in a high-floor economy. Everything, from your eggs to your car insurance, has hit a new, higher baseline price that isn't going back down. According to a 2025 Bankrate report, 59% of Americans can't even cover a $1,000 emergency expense with savings. But here's what most people don't realize. Even those who can are often drastically underprepared because they are using 2019 math for 2025 problems. The new math, a reality check. Let's look at some concrete numbers. In 2021, the average car repair cost was significantly lower. Fast forward to today, and car repair costs have jumped over 33% in the last 4 years. A simple trip to the shop now averages $838. If your emergency fund is still based on what your life cost 3 years ago, you don't have a safety net. You have a suggestion of a safety net. Now, you might be thinking, John, I'll just spend less if things get bad. No you won't. You can't budget your way out of a 25% tariff-driven increase on auto parts or a 15% jump in home insurance premiums. These are fixed costs. The psychological trap. Financial fatigue. This is where it gets really interesting. It's not just about the math, it's about what the math does to your brain. There's a new term popping up in 2025 called financial stress syndrome. A recent study found that 42% of people with healthy incomes are constantly worried about money. Why? Because they are suffering from middle-class poverty. They earn good money, but because their cushion feels so thin due to inflation, they live in a state of chronic fatigue. Think of your emergency fund like the oxygen mask on a plane. If the mask is too small or the oxygen flow is too weak, you start to panic. And when you panic, you make terrible financial decisions. You put that car repair on a credit card with 24% APR, and suddenly, your emergency has a 20-year tail of debt. The new rule, the 9-month pillar. So, what's the new rule for 2025? The 3 to 6 month rule is now the 6 to 9 month rule. I know. You're probably rolling your eyes. John, I can barely save 3 months. How am I supposed to save 9? Here is why this is non-negotiable now. Job market volatility. In 2025, the average time to find a new job in skilled sectors has stretched. The lumpy expense reality. Emergencies don't happen one at a time. They chain react. Your car breaks down, which makes you late for work, which leads to a lost bonus, which happens the same month your HVAC dies. The peace of mind premium. Research shows that the way you feel about your bank balance matters 20 times more for your mental health than the actual number. Actionable steps. How to catch up. How do we actually get there? We aren't going to just wish more money into the account. Step 1. The essentials only audit. Stop calculating your fund based on your current lifestyle. Calculate it based on your survival lifestyle. Old way. Rent, $2,000. Plus dining out, $500. Plus subs, $100. equals $2,600. New way, rent, $2,000, plus basic groceries, $400, plus utilities, $300, equals $2,700. Notice how even the survival cost is now higher than the old lifestyle cost. Step 2. Use the windfall 50 rule. In 2025, any tax refund, bonus, or side hustle cash gets split. 50% to the emergency fund, 50% to whatever else. No exceptions. Step 3. High yield is mandatory. If your emergency fund is in a traditional big bank savings account earning 0.01%, you are literally losing money to inflation every single second. You need a high-yield savings account. Here is what most people don't realize when they sit down to calculate their number. They look at their bank statement from last month and think, okay, I spent $4,000, so $12,000 is 3 months. But that is a static snapshot of a dynamic problem. In 2025, we are dealing with lifestyle creep by proxy. This is where you haven't actually upgraded your life. You're still driving the same car and living in the same apartment, but the maintenance of that life has crept up around you. Let's look at the home maintenance rule. For decades, the rule was to set aside 1% of your home's value for annual repairs. In 2025, with the cost of labor and raw materials like copper and lumber up significantly, that number is closer to 2% to 3%. If you own a $400,000 home, you need to expect $8,000 to $12,000 in emergencies every single year just to keep the roof from leaking and the AC running. That's $1,000 a month. If your emergency fund is only $10,000, one bad roof leak doesn't just dent your savings, it liquidates it. The job loss lag of 2025. This is where it gets really scary, and it's something nobody wants to talk about. The job market in 2025 isn't what it was in the Great Resignation era. Back then, you could quit on a Monday and have a new offer by Thursday. Today, the average duration of unemployment for specialized roles is now 24 weeks. That is 6 months. Think about that. If the average search takes 6 months and you only have a 3-month emergency fund, you are mathematically guaranteed to run out of money before you find your next paycheck. You'll be forced to take the first job that comes along, even if it pays 20% less, just to keep the lights on. This is called a survival pivot, and it's a trap that can derail your career trajectory for a decade. By having a 9-month fund, you aren't just buying groceries, you are buying leverage. You are buying the ability to say no to a bad job offer so you can wait for the right one. The mid-video reality check. Are you liquid? Now, you might be thinking, John, I have plenty of money in my 401k and my brokerage account. I can just sell some stock if things get hairy. Stop right there. This is one of the most dangerous assumptions you can make. In 2025, market volatility is the new normal. If you have an emergency during a 15% market correction, which happens more often than you think, and you're forced to sell your stocks to pay for a medical bill, you are locking in those losses forever. You're effectively paying a desperation tax on your own investments. An emergency fund isn't an investment. It's insurance. You don't look at your car insurance and get mad that it didn't give you an 8% return this year, right? You pay it so that when things go wrong, you don't go broke. Your emergency fund serves the exact same purpose. Its job isn't to make you rich. Its job is to keep you from becoming poor. The anatomy of the cascade. Let's use a story to illustrate why the old rule fails. Meet Sarah. Sarah had $15,000 in her emergency fund, which was 4 months of her expenses. She felt great. In April, Sarah's company restructured. That's 2025 speak for layoffs. Month 1. Sarah is confident. She starts applying. Month 2. The ghost job phenomenon hits. She's had 4 interviews, but companies are moving slowly. Her Cobra health insurance kicks in, costing her $800 a month, something she forgot to factor into her emergency budget. Month 3. Her water heater bursts. It's a $20,500 repair. Suddenly, her 3 months of remaining cash is actually only 5 weeks. Month 4. Anxiety sets in. Because she's stressed, she bombs an interview for her dream job. She's now desperate. This is the financial cascade. Emergencies are social creatures. They like to travel in groups. If Sarah had the new rule of 9 months, $35,000 in her case, month 4 wouldn't be a crisis. It would just be another Tuesday. She would have stayed calm, nailed the interview, and stayed on track. How to build the fortress. Action plan. If you're sitting there with $2,000 in your account, hearing me talk about $35,000 probably feels like I'm telling you to build a ladder to the moon. I get it. It's daunting. But here is the 2025 blueprint for building your financial fortress without losing your mind. 1. The tiered approach. Don't try to hit the 9-month goal all at once. Break it into 3 tiers. Tier 1, the starter kit, $2,500. This covers the inconveniences, the flat tire, the broken tooth, the vet visit. Tier 2, the 3-month stability pillar. This is the old rule. Once you hit this, your cortisol levels will naturally drop. Tier 3, the 9-month fortress. This is where you become unfireable because you don't actually need the paycheck to survive the year. 2. The subscription scythe. In 2025, the average household spends $219 a month on subscriptions they don't fully use. That's over $20,600 a year. If you took that invisible money and moved it to a high-yield savings account, HYSA, at 4.5%, in 5 years you'd have over $15,000. Just from canceling apps you don't watch. 3. The gap strategy. Here's what most people don't realize. The fastest way to grow your fund isn't just saving more, it's widening the gap between what you earn and what you spend. If you get a 3% raise this year, don't change your lifestyle. Move that entire 3% into your Fortress fund via auto deposit. If you never see the money, you never miss the money. The final revelation. The cost of peace. I want to leave you with a thought that changed the way I look at my own bank account. In the 1990s, an emergency fund was about preparedness. In 2025, an emergency fund is about mental health. There is a direct, measurable correlation between the size of your liquid savings and your ability to be a good partner, a good parent, and a creative employee. When you are living on the edge, your brain stays in the amygdala, the fight-or-flight center. You can't think long-term when you're worried about next month's rent. Here is what most people don't realize when they look at their budget. Inflation doesn't just make your milk more expensive, it makes your risk more expensive. In the financial world, we talk a lot about purchasing power, but we rarely talk about protection power. In 2020, a $10,000 emergency fund could buy you a used engine, 6 months of groceries, and maybe a flight home for a family emergency. In 2025, that same $10,000 has seen its protection power slashed by nearly 30%. If you haven't increased your emergency fund by at least 25% since 2021, you are effectively underinsured against your own life. You're driving a Ferrari of a career with a spare tire meant for a bicycle. It's not a matter of if it pops, it's a matter of when. The algorithm of your career. Look, let's talk about the elephant in the room, AI and the gigification of everything. In 2025, the job market has become algorithmic. Companies are using data to trim redundancies, people, faster and more frequently than ever before. We've entered the era of the micro-recession. This is where the overall economy looks fine on the news, but your specific industry, whether it's tech, marketing, or middle management, suddenly hits a wall. This is where the 9-month rule becomes your secret weapon. When everyone else is panic applying for jobs because they have a 2-month runway, they smell of desperation. And let me tell you, HR departments can smell financial desperation through a Zoom screen. If you have a 9-month Fortress fund, you show up to interviews with walk-away power. You're calm, you're confident, You're willing to negotiate for a $10,000 higher salary because you aren't worried about how you'll pay for electricity next Tuesday. This is the psychological dividend of the new rule. The bigger your fund, the higher your career earnings tend to be because you never make decisions out of fear. The home equity illusion. Now, you might be thinking, John, I've got $200,000 in home equity. I'll just pull a HELOC, home equity line of credit, if I lose my job. Let's pause there. This is a classic fair weather strategy. Here's the problem. Banks are not your friends when it's raining. In 2025, banks are using real-time data to monitor risk. If you lose your job and your credit score dips even slightly, or if the housing market in your specific zip code cools down, the bank can, and often will, freeze your credit line. I've seen it happen. People count on their house to be their emergency fund, only to find the bank vault locked exactly when they need the key. Your emergency fund must be uncorrelated and liquid. It needs to be in a boring FDIC-insured account that doesn't care what the stock market or the housing market is doing. The math of the chain reaction. Let's get into some specific John-style math. I want to show you why $5,000, the standard advice for years, is a dangerous joke in 2025. Let's look at a typical 2025 emergency chain reaction. Event A. Your child needs an emergency dental procedure. In 2025, without top-tier dental insurance, a root canal and crown average $2,200. Event B. While driving home from the dentist, your transmission starts slipping. Because of supply chain shifts and the complexity of modern 10-speed transmissions, a rebuild is now $4,500. Event C. You take 2 days off work to deal with the car and the kid. You're a 1099 contractor or in a flexible role, so you lose $600 in billable income. Total cost of one bad week, $7,300. If you had the old-school $5,000 fund, you are now $2,300 in the hole. Where does that $2,300 go? It goes on a credit card. At the average 2025 interest rate of 24.99%, if you only pay the minimum, that bad week will cost you an additional $4,000 in interest over the next few years. By having a $20,000 fund instead of a $5,000 fund, you didn't just save yourself the stress. You saved yourself $4,000 in interest payments. Your emergency fund just earned you a 20% return by preventing high-interest debt. That is better than the S&P 500's historical average. The survival budget versus the real budget. This is where it gets really interesting. Most people calculate their emergency fund based on their survival budget: rent, beans, and rice. But that's a psychological lie. If you are unemployed for 6 months, are you really going to sit in a dark room and eat beans for 180 days? No. You're going to buy a coffee to get out of the house. You're going to spend money on LinkedIn Premium. You're going to have a birthday or a holiday. The new rule says you should calculate your 9-month fund based on 80% of your current spending, not 50%. Why? Because frugal fatigue is real. If you try to live on a survival budget for more than 2 months, you will eventually binge spend out of pure emotional exhaustion. We want a fund that is robust enough to let you live a dignified life while you recover from a setback. The stealth threat. Insurance deductibles. Here is something else most people don't realize. Insurance companies have shifted the risk to you. In 2025, to keep premiums affordable, many people have switched to high-deductible health plans, HDHPs, and car insurance with $1,000 or $2,000 deductibles. If you have a major medical event, your out-of-pocket maximum for the year could be $9,150 for an individual. If your emergency fund is only $10,000, one hospital stay literally wipes you out. You are back to zero. You are one more flat tire away from total financial collapse. This is why the 9-month rule isn't over-saving. It's accounting for the structural shifts in how the world works. The world has decided that you are responsible for the first $10,000 of any disaster. If you don't have that money sitting in a high-yield savings account, you are essentially gambling with your future. Tactical execution. The sweep method. So, how do we get this done in a world where everything costs more? We use the sweep method. Most people try to save what's left over at the end of the month. But in 2025, with targeted social media ads and frictionless one-click shopping, there is never anything left over. The algorithm is better at spending your money than you are at saving it. Set a basics threshold. Decide that your checking account should never exceed, say, $3,000. The Friday sweep. Every Friday afternoon, any dollar in your checking account above that $3,000 threshold gets swept automatically into your Fortress fund. Gamify the yield. In 2025, HYSA rates are still competitive. Every month, look at the interest your fund earned. That free money is your reward. Use it to buy one small thing you love. It creates a positive feedback loop. The more I save, the more free coffee, books, gear I get from the interest. The emotional transition. I want to be honest with you. Moving from a 3-month mindset to a 9-month mindset feels like a drag at first. You'll look at that pile of cash and think, man, I could have put this into Tesla or Bitcoin or a new kitchen. But there will come a moment. Maybe it's a global black swan event, or maybe it's just a rumor of layoffs at your office, where you will look at that balance and feel a physical sensation of calm wash over your shoulders. That calm is worth more than any stock market gain. That calm is what allows you to be a better spouse, a more present parent, and a more creative human being. You aren't just saving money, you are buying back your agency. Your action plan for this week. I'm not asking you to have 9 months of cash by next Friday. I'm asking you to acknowledge that the world has changed. Audit your true monthly burn. Total up every single dollar that left your account in the last 60 days. Divide by 2. That's your real number. Check your safety net gap. Multiply that number by 9. How far away are you? The $100 challenge. Can you find $100 this week? Sell something on Marketplace, skip the takeout, or cancel that one streaming service you only use for one show. Put that $100 into a separate account labeled The Fortress.